under very general conditions, quite independent from the basic structure of the matter in the extremely small, on the Planck level. Just to give you and the viewer an idea what's the Planck level. Planck level is something like 10 to the minus 35 centimeter. If a nuclear sizes are 10 to the minus 15, meaning to get to the Planck level of sizes, you have to go down trillion times smaller. Or if you imagine that we are talking about human size, then the nucleus is like the size of the galaxies, then the Planck size is something like a human size. I did not calculate it accurately, but something like that. So it's enormously small. What happens in the small, which is extreme, does not affect what happens after the expansion has developed a bit, and then we are in the Einsteinian level. Going back, it must have a limit in time. And this has been proven and publicized, and including, amazingly, Guth himself, the one who had the multiverse solution for atheism. He did not say he's trying it for atheism, but as a scientist, say I try to explain things without assuming anything external from physics. So still, multiple universe, although it's too much of metaphysics, it still is not like a god, which is a bit of an oddity for scientists in the 80s, in this century. But down the road, it will be. For example, Lee Smolin, in discussing supergravity, at the end he comes to that problem and say, if supergravity, he has parameters there, they have to be fixed also by hand. If supergravity cannot solve the parameter problem, then science will become religion. I mean precisely that he said, science will remain science and religion, but science will be a proof for religion, meaning a proof of existence of God. Because there's no escape. Rationally, it's impossible to have that parameter chosen this way. Except by a chooser, by an intelligent, free agent. There's no escape. So I would say, without going technicality, if you want to see the Kalam argument, check Craig. I think it's a solid argument. I think it's enough for you and for the listeners to know that I am contingent, everything around me is contingent. The only escape from that is to claim the whole universe is actually one unity, and this subdivision in smaller bits is illusory. Actually, it's one entity. It's one entity. It's well integrated. Even if I am here, I'm still somehow integrated to a galaxy 10 billions far away. That's not Star Wars, far away. Like this. Still integrated, still interacting with it. So this separation is illusion. It's one entity, but in that case, still that one entity has to be proven to be necessarily existing and free, having no free parameters, which all scientific research until now has undermined completely. So science is delivering us the material, but the rational conclusion has to be done by the necessity. And also, I started with, but got interrupted. Just remind you of a new good development, is that the so-called logical or the logic absolute argument by Reverend Slick. I came to know it recently, so I admit that. I'm not aware about it. I am aware about the argument of the ontological proof of God by Saint Anselm, which has the famous objection of Kant, and which is some people are working to overcome by analyzing logic and universals and so on. So from that angle, so it seems to be related in the back door, but we are not yet there, because it seems to be related to very deep analytical issues with universals and concepts and so on. But there are some progress, quite a number of American scholars are working with that. But this one is saying that the existence of these logic absolutes, that they are absolute.
Oh, is that the transcendental argument for the proof of God? Yeah,
that these logic absolute, that they are binding, that no mind can deviate from them, cannot be explained by any physical process, or it must be imprinted in the universe by an infinite mind, quote and unquote. And I think this is also quite a solid one.
I mean,
it's quite a solid one, but it has to be structured and articulated further.
I mean, for me, with very limited knowledge on this, I'm not a physicist, like I said before, the most appealing scientific explanation for me is the anthropic principle, where the laws of the universe are currently set to allow us to exist. Anything beyond that, and I think you touched on it very early on.
The parameters have to be shown in the beginning so that we exist today.
We need 3 dimensions, but we need a psychological arrow of time to.
But this itself is not an argument in necessity, because someone could say this is by necessity of the universe necessarily existing, and the necessarily existing will contain that humans will evolve. The point is that there's a fine point. These have to be tuned in the beginning to but if a theory can be developed that I argue it will never and can't be that the universe will produce these parameters automatically from its own equations, then this is by necessity like that.
But my point on that was, if we only ever had 4 dimensions, 3 of measurement, 3 dimensions and time, and said, okay, that's the anthropic principle behind why we exist, then I would accept someone else's. I would say, well, that doesn't prove anything. It just proves that we came to be within those parameters. But with current quantum theory, where it is, we're talking about more than 3 dimensions. There's 10, and you talked about it very early on, where the 3 dimensions and time, the 4 dimensions we currently need for our existence, are in space-time are there because space-time is smooth. And I'm talking beyond my knowledge level here, but, because they are at a point where they allow us to exist, whereas all the other dimensions, be that 6 others or 16 others or whatever else, they have so much curvature into the space-time that, like you were saying, they're just so curved up that we don't perceive them. Right? Now,
I agree with you.
Now, why are all the dimensions not the same, either flat space-time or infinitely curved? For me, the anthropic principle comes in, and for me, God comes in, because of those 10 or 22, however dimensions there are, 4 were needed for us to exist, so 4 were allowed to be flat space-time.
But you have to structure element a little bit better, saying there are 2 possibilities for the universe to evolve, for example, that more than 6 can rectify. It's originally, let's say 10. Let's agree that's the only one which can exist mathematically. Let's assume just arbitrary, because I think the 22 or the 26 for the superstrings could exist also. So that will even damage that. Even if that's the only one dimensional, that's still the 26 could exist, under which one has been chosen. Why is this chosen and not this one? Or why this 26 has been slimmed down into strings and then down into these stages. So there are 2 various options available, and the moment we have 2 options available, a chooser must be there. That he shows that intelligence being there, that's his choice. That's another issue related to his divine essence. Obviously, if he's a free agent and with infinite knowledge, somehow his being is so that he would love to have beings which are a small miniature of himself, who have free will. And we have some narration saying that Allah created Adam according to his image, meaning that intellectual image, because Allah has no shape in that sense. So if you think that his face is like, this is absurd. Leave this. We're not talking about people who are mentally deranged. We're talking about rational people listening to us. But beings which have free will, have knowledge, but because they're finite, their knowledge is kasbi. They have to learn to get the knowledge. And their free will is limited, is not infinite. That's all clear. But they are such beings are valuable. So they give him company in existence. There's a Sufi statement saying, I was a hidden treasure. Because being like that is a treasure, is an enormous, infinite treasure. And that nobody was enjoying. Now, nothing else was enjoying that thing. I wanted others to participate in that existence and enjoy. So I wanted to be appreciated and others enjoy his own being, and he wants others to enjoy his existence. This is a Sufi statement, but it has, every time you say, this is not a proper narration, it's not established from the Prophet, but it's a true statement. He is the ultimate treasure imaginable in existence, and it would be quite stingy just to exclude himself, enjoy like the divine being of Aristotle, who is secluding himself, just admiring himself and all eternity is doing nothing. Just the universe moves out of love to him. No, this one gives. That's his nature, that's the way he is. But has to be ascertained by going back to revelation and other principles of reason, to not to go overboard and then do the Christian mistake and the other mistakes. That has to be really ascertained and analyzed. But the argument should be structured saying that one universe is not necessarily existing, it is contingent. There are at least two more options. Some people say the options are so much and they think in probability, but that's a mistake. You don't need that. The problem with probability, and so by chance, is that the people misunderstand the theory of probability because they are not scientists, they are not mathematicians. Theory of probability assumes there is a set of experiments available. It's called a set, the basic set. And for every event there, you list the events, and everyone has a probability between 0 and 1, with the provision that any one of them is certain, the totality is certain, and certain laws there. So there is already a set, and there is someone doing an experiment, but that has been all that abstracted from, and it made as a set theory and formalized set of equations. It does not mean it can exist in reality. That it exists only in your brain after you abstract it from an experimental situation, which means a chooser and events there. But before the universe is there, there's no events whatsoever to choose from. Maybe a chooser, but not. So claiming it happened by accident or by probability, this is nonsense. This is taking probability theory out of its border. Like exactly the scientist who shoot over his own limit and shot himself in the foot. That's exactly the same. So the structural argument should be, this is a valid argument, the structural argument is really not that we exist, and this is quite interesting and amazing, is that we could have possibly not existed. This universe is contingent. Back to the contingency argument. If that's so, then there must be a chooser. And the claim with the probability that it happened haphazard is undermine rationality. If it's haphazard, then everything could be haphazard, and there is no rationality whatsoever. And there's no explanation. Then someone who claims that, okay, fine, we will welcome you. You go to the mental institution. The one in the mental institution is as good as you. What's the difference? Because in the mental institution, things happen haphazard. A man could stand and be talking to the wall and kissing the wall. I love you very much. You cannot blame him, because in his world it's like that. In your world, your wife is the nice looking one and you kiss her, but this guy kisses the wall. Both of you are absolutely equally right. And even argument that this is biologically conditioned like that is invalid, because this has no conditioning. Conditions and causal effect are untied, are broken. So what's the fuss? It is just in your world, you are mental, he is mental, everyone is mental, but everyone is mental in his own way, and nobody has the right to tell the other one anything. There is no rationality left. So you have to choose either mental institution or rationality. You still have a choice, ultimately. That's what you say a leap of faith. But that happens by yourself, looking in yourself and interacting with the universe around you until you come to the state that I must get out of the state of madness. Or commit suicide. If you commit suicide, fine, problem is solved, you are gone, we don't need to deal with you. But if you stay alive, you have to come to terms with the reality around you. Is it real? Is Ismail here real, or it's just my own imagination? I have to come to terms with that one day. You may stay in such a state of sickness for several days, even weeks. Al-Ghazali went through such a state, that he doubted even his own existence. But he said, I am an imagination imagining itself, nothingness imagining itself, it's just utterly absurd. And then ultimately he came that there must be something firm we can start from. I am here, I do exist. And this rationality does make sense. I can rely on it and I can start developing. The alternative will be that nothing, everything is sensible and unsensible at the same time. The word sensible loses meaning, even the language loses meaning. There is no sense to say that this is a word. It could be a donkey. What's the difference? No difference.
Dr. Massari, you mentioned earlier on, right at the beginning, that with the Indian layman or the...
I would say he's more rational than the scientists who went overboard.
Fine. And you just said that all the scientists are doing is that they're just giving us...
No, not all, but in the excitement of the evidence, now they are becoming more modest.
No, but I'm saying that they're just explaining the details.
Yeah. Their job is to describe the phenomena as they are.
Absolutely, and
push the limit of experimentation.
Both the Indian and the scientists, they can both perceive what it is.
Yeah.
So, whether there is 3 dimensions in this time or 22 dimensions, isn't that essentially irrelevant? Because you still have to conclude something.
No, but if a scientist comes in, we have that, and we have explanation of it, say to me, you don't have it yet, you are still in this contingent.
But I'm speaking from myself. A lot of people who will watch YouTube, if you're in school philosophy, not everyone's a physicist. So, to have that discussion with people, it's very difficult. The normal discussion is they'll have a discussion on face value. So, how do you suggest a non-physicist, if a physicist or someone who's trying to use fancy words or trying to bamboozle the opponent, what is the best approach to deal with these people for a lay
Just what I said at the beginning. You look at yourself. I am created. Without my parents coming together, I would not have, and there are many people who never came together and never have children. So this could have happened to me. So I am contingent, everything around me is contingent, and there is no evidence for the claim that I am actually connected somehow to a galaxy 10 billion years far away and influenced me, and well separated. I have a well separated identity. I am something different than the wall and different than the mountains, and all of these things are well separated and contingent, and this is enough to regard the whole universe as contingent. There must be a necessary existing being. That's enough for the common man. Now the atheist will come with all kind of argument and put science forward.
You've always been there. They say that we've never seen this Big Bang. As far as we're concerned, this is just a theory.
the atheist cannot say that. The atheist come with science, say, "Oh, you are deceived. You are simple-minded. We have more information." And the more he digs deeper, the more he digs his own grave. That's what we are showing. That's it. But originally, in time past, the people have this simple thing. They didn't need to know more than. And this is what the Quran says. If there's a doubt that
nowadays, you know what they say, the atheists will say nowadays is, okay, we have come to the conclusion that the universe did have a beginning. Yeah. They all say that.
Yeah. They must. There's no escape.
Yeah. Lawrence Krauss, all those
that's
theoretical physicists. But then they will say, for you to say that there is a God or it was created, you have no proof for that.
I'm saying this.
So how do you address that?
Before you answer that question, 100 years ago, maybe 200 years ago, people were still able to have these discussions. People will still be able to fine. So they didn't rely upon the Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah, they don't need the Big Bang.
This is what I'm trying to say. So I'm saying is that even if someone comes along and says that the Big Bang Theory proves that,
Islam, as I said, Ghazali already did that. His Kalam argument does not need anything of that. It's just the time. Time is just the counting of the number of circulation of the sun around the earth around the sun, or the movement of the stars, because we can fix time by watching the stars. It's just how many times we rotate around the sun. Even if we say we are not rotating around, the sun is rotating around us, it's irrelevant. There's a movement in the universe which we see but nobody can deny. And the time is just can't be clocked. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. It cannot be infinite seconds. It has a beginning. That's essentially the Kalam argument. You don't need it. The evidences for God are so evident. The problem with the atheism that they try to undermine these evidences by more sophisticated philosophical and scientific arguments. At a certain time, when science was advancing and there was a high wave of science and over-trust in science, and they thought science would solve all problems, obviously this trust is now being broken and being subdued and becoming a little bit more modest. They have a high day. That's where the dialectic materialism emerged. That's where communism was able to control complete countries, etc. But it could not answer this simple question that I am contingent, everything is contingent. How come that the collection of contingent suddenly become still existing? Maybe that common man does not articulate it in that way. You have to create it in different ways. I agree with that. Sometimes they take the argument from the sign, which is a flawed one in itself, but it's quite convincing.
That's flawed.
But it's flawed. Because it is very well possible that from the starting point of the universe, it's very well possible that it kick-started and all the initial conditions are enough to develop exactly as it developed today. We don't need, except to the quantum issue and the necessity to keep uncertainty and free will. But we could imagine a universe where there are no free agents and it can develop there. And we will not be around to discuss that, obviously, but it could imagine that and it will be kick-started.
No, but isn't the design argument on a lot of what Allah says in the Quran?
The Quran addresses people in various levels of sophistication. Quran is not addressing only the philosophers.
No, but you're saying that it's a flawed argument. Allah says, I've created this. Can you not see? I've created the heaven.
Oh yeah, because the people perceive that they were not arguing. But he was not arguing with atheists. He was arguing with pagans and so on. When he argued with atheists, he says for himself, "Am khaliqu min ghayri shay'in am hum al-khaliqun? Am khalaqu as-samawati wal arda bal la yuqinun?" Are they created out of nothing, or they are the creating of themselves, which is impossible? Or did they create heaven and earth? But they don't believe, they don't have any certitude. Meaning everyone agrees from just mere vision that these things are happening, they are not eternal. You perceive that almost by imminent necessity. By necessity of reason, even the simple man who doesn't use the term necessarily existing, contingent, impossible, he knows that. That we articulate in such a language, a sophisticated one, because we do study and the philosophers have sat and analyzed that, does not mean that they are not built in the part of the logic absolutes and deduced from that by necessity. There's no escape from it. Otherwise rationality will go.
Could I ask a question regarding the base of a lot of this, which is basically to be able to prove the oneness and the existence of supreme God, eternal, absolute, which everything else is determined by, which everything points to, by using the rationality by itself alone. I put forward that, is it possible that it's not just the rationality, but there is something else as well? I used the example that you used earlier of the poor Indian man, who you say is more philosophical, less rational, more
rational, but less scientific.
Less scientific,
but more rational than the scientist who denies that God is needed to explain things.
Indeed, but it is if you see science as an exercise in the rational side of the brain of the human mind, and a purely rational pursuit in itself, whether they arrive at the right conclusion or not, it is indeed an exercise in that side of the brain, rather than not exploring or turning away from that sort of thing, or being in a drunken state and floating through life in a non-absolute.
No, why I said that the poor Indian is more rational than a scientist, because he referred to the first cause, admitting that you not about the details. That's still acceptable, because Allah is the ultimate, or God is the ultimate cause. The scientist, by claiming, knowing how the process is, saying the process has no beginning or initiator, is breaking the law of rationality. He's just jumping the gun. He's making a rational mistake, transgressing his limit. This one does not transgress. He said, I don't know the details of the explanation. Like, for example, you say, Alhamdulillah, God gave me a child yesterday. Everyone knows that you have cohabited your wife, and everyone knows how the process is. But still, God gave me a child.
Doc, for empiricism, an empirical person like David Hume or someone will say everything is just
from experience.
Yeah, it's from experience.
No knowledge is outside experience.
Exactly.
But
for you to make that jump, you'll say that you're.
I thought this has collapsed already, because the claim that every knowledge comes from experience is not an experimental fact. So you have destroyed your own theory right out from the beginning. That's not an experimental. There's no experiment which proves that all experiments are true. But and then we have to add experiment to prove this one ad infinitum. It doesn't work. No. Before you do any experiment, you have something in your mind. You have you have the previous information put together. You design the experiment and do the experiment, and you design the experiment so that it tune to that, meaning that things are connected causally and rationally. That's all done before the experiment. Then you gain from experiment, if it is done properly, some extra knowledge about certain realities, certain facts. That's all. But all knowledge, the problem is that all knowledge coming from experiment is wrong. That A cannot be A and non-A at the same time, the principle of identity does not come from experiment. That's not a matter of experimentation. That's by rational necessity, by logic, absolutely. You start by that in your experiment.
You're a tabula rasa, you're a blank
that's not
piece
possible.
Of paper.
It's not possible.
Now,
the reality refuted that. The argument refutes and the reality refutes. No. The structure of the brain refutes that.
There was an argument I heard on TV a while back. I forget by which scientist it was proposed, but from what I remembered of it, he was basically using, in a Western scientific context, that theory to counteract if you want to collect all the other scientific theories in a group, those which try to move away from any religious sort of teaching. And he was basically saying that the mind has two hemispheres, the left and right, and one of them is any rational pursuit, scientific, this and that, one side is at use, and anything creative, dreaming, emotional, non-thinking, basically, is the other side is, and they've proven this scientifically, ironically, that the activities on the other side. So he said if they go to the extreme of denying God or any kind of unseen reality beyond this, then at most what's happening is one side of the brain, and I quote, is pissing on the other side. And it's basically, I'm basically saying that basically that's a state of schizophrenia. Is basically you have, and that's a reality which you have. You can look in, just as you look outside, you have a reality inside you. It's like those who do not take emotion into account, those who do not take other non-tangible things into account. They're still there, you know they're there, and everyone will accept that you will have this. So, and no one on this planet will deny this. They might deny other things, but no one denies this, yet they deny this, and its source as well. So at most, you are basically using one side and neglecting the other side. So that is a state of imbalance, or schizophrenia.
But always say that's unfortunately, the universe is imbalanced. That's all. But it doesn't prove existence. So, because this is argument from aesthetics and ethics that it is not nice to be imbalanced. It's not nice, but maybe the universe is imbalanced somehow in this respect, and this had evolved in evolution to guarantee, for example, that the mother instinct is to keep the species ongoing. Actually, the mother is losing all the time. The kids grow up and she just get neglected most of the time. So she's wasting her own rights and benefit for the kids forced by evolution so that species continue or something like that. It looks like quite not a very good deal. But you could argue all these things. I'm not saying this, but the question is that we are discussing actually an issue of more deeper level. I would say in the issue of God's existence, the proof should be essentially ontological. The moment you get aesthetic and other things, it may create some problems, because there will be all these counter arguments and problems with the limitations.
But that is the issue. Is that so solid a fact that it has to be ontological, rational?
Oh, it is. It is. That's what we say.
But could I then interject an argument against this, that if you look at everything, human rational pursuit, scientific, Western scientific 20th century, going back, since they separated the church from the state, since they lost certainty in God.
Actually, they lost certainty in Christianity originally.
Yes. Yes.
Because the only model of God they have is the Judeo-Christian one, which is obviously based on scriptures, which are so faulty that is really amazing. That's where the problem comes. And the only other source which could have saved is Islam, but Islam is the enemy.
Don't go to the enemy. Not accept it. But they went down the rational pathway, and they still haven't arrived at the truth.
No, they don't want the rational. They don't want the rational way. They want the irrational way, breaking the limit of science to go to rationality. They thought science will substitute for full rationality. It is part of the rationality
because it's suited the political agenda.
Could you define?
There's political agenda and historic agenda and social agenda. It's history run in the wrong path for some considerable time, because it insisted to avoid looking to another alternative. Very simple, because of historical reasons.
How do you define ontological thought? I mean,
exist or non-exist. That's the issue of existence. Don't look at morality. Don't look at good or evil. Does this thing exist or do not exist? That's where we go. Now, believing in God or having faith in the sense of religion is an act of will. Has nothing to do with that. You have to be certain that He exists first, but you have to accept that He's your Lord and submit. That's what makes you a believer, which has a share in the hereafter in having في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند ملك, to be in the companionship in the divine presence. That's what not just the mere knowledge. The mere knowledge was never an issue. Yeah, there are a few atheists around. They have become plenty because of this European disease, which started about 4 or 5 centuries back and is now maybe hopefully going into a correction phase. Hopefully, I don't think it will be corrected, because it is history really running aground. For example, most of Europe is very secular. People are completely unreligious. America is maybe a saving, but America is secluded and so nationalistic and so narrow-minded and pseudo-racist. So it doesn't give the world a model. It could have given, because the Americans are quite religious and they are attending church and so on. But they also run aground because they insist on certain things which they cannot stand any scrutiny. But independent of that, let's go back. So, what I was talking about, yeah.
He was going to mention an argument against ontology.
No, it can't be, because this is fundamental. Like an argument against reason. It will defeat itself.
Are there any other methods besides ontology? Which
I think that the two methods, we don't need ontology. But we need rationality again of a solid type, is to check history if there is any message from the divine coming to mankind. And this is quite fraught with problems, which Hume also addressed. That what's more probable, that someone died on the cross and was resurrected. That's his example I think he used, or that the people just lied. It's more probable that lied. That's more probable, yes. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
But that's in the case of Jesus, because the historic record is not that reliable. Although I would say in the general picture is quite reliable, and Craig is having a point there, but his problem is that he is stuck that he's a divine being who was crucified for our sins and resurrected. I could give another theory which also rely on the divine intervention, also like that someone else was crucified by God's son, maybe Judas like Iscariot himself, and Jesus was saved at the side, and he appealed to the people and told them, I was not crucified, but Paul did not like that, because Paul was influenced by Mithraism. He needs a God to die for man, like in the Mithrite religion. So he's coming from Mithrite background, and then he insisted that no, he died on the cross for our sins and established Christianity. I'm not going with these points. I say there's another explanation using the divine, and there's also the materialistic explanation of lying or resurrected from the grave.
Dr. Mosley, it's 10 o'clock, yeah? Okay, time is moving on. Okay, let's just try to wrap this up.
We have to bring that further.
Okay, let's just try and wrap this up a little bit like this. Okay, maybe should we get him just to do a quick step 1, step 2, step 3 proof of God or something?
No, I suggest you digest that and suggest what the next phase will be. I wanted just to stress today one remaining point. Okay. The other main one, I think, for God proof is the better one, which finishes many problems at the same go, is that to check history if there have been, because we have here claimed that some people can claim to be prophets, that's well known, and some people claim to be soothsayer, is known, and some charlatans, and we have a magician, that's full in the earth, that's well established. Check, is there any one historical incident or several which can be handled with certitude and can be proven to be based on revelation? And I would argue the arguments of Craig concerning Jesus are correct, provided if he liberates himself from the Pauline fiction that the one died on the cross is the Son of God and he died for our sin. This is a fiction, and it has internal contradictions which are unsurmountable. We discussed that the divine being cannot have any son, is impossible. The divine being can be crucified. The divine being cannot merge with flesh and blood and suffer pain. So the pain was only the human Jesus, the poor guy was flogged for nothing, and the divine never experienced anything. These inconsistencies from a metaphysical aspect. From physical aspect, someone was crucified. This someone could be Jesus, and he was resurrected. That's what they used to say. He did not really die, and the man was bribed, and then the guy, what's his name, John of Armitius or Joseph of Armitius, bribed them, and they just pushed the spear in the non-deadly place, and he revived him, and he escaped. Conspiracy, that's possible. It's very remote, but it's possible. There are many other explanations assuming that the main there's another one relying on the divinity of his message, that he's a divinely appointed messenger and he has been saved and the traitor has been crucified. But we don't have all these doubts concerning Muhammad Al Massari, and that's we will get to that. We have solid historic evidence for his existence. We have solid historic information about him. We have solid information. Even if some people say the Quran is collected by Uthman, fine, okay. And some parts have been hidden, no problem. What we have in hand is enough. Let us stick to that, what we have in hand. And the Sunnah, plenty is fabricated, no problem, but we have plenty is not fabricated. We have prophecies which have been realized much later after the recordation of the Sunnah. We have quite a considerable amount of evidence there, which is very persuasive.
Sorry, what does Sunnah mean?
Same with the tradition of the Prophet, the narration from the Prophet. Okay. So we have enough information there to conclude with certitude that we have here non-physical phenomena and evidences supporting his claim to be a divinely appointed messenger. This, by necessity, will dictate he cannot be sent by the moon, which is a dead body, nor by a galaxy far, far away, like Star Wars. That's all will do the job. The only thing which will do the job, that the divine being appointed him. This divine being obviously is knowledgeable. He can articulate himself, and because that divine being claimed to be the creator of the universe, there is no reason to reject this one for any whatever it is. So it must be the necessarily existing being we are looking for. So his knowledge is infinite, his power is infinite, etc. All these arguments, and he articulated that also in his book. But he doesn't need even to articulate that. We know that in advance. Otherwise, we would not have concluded that. These are just immediately it comes out of the mind, and then we have there certain answers about issues of qadar. Good answer, solid answer, respectable answer. We have settled many issues which maybe science will never be settling it in a satisfactory way there, or metaphysical time, not on physical time. It has not come to teach us physics and how to build machines. It has come to let us come to terms with what the relation to him, what the relation to free will, what the relation to responsibility, is there a resurrection or not. These questions are settled by him, because these have to rely on a report, because they are possibilities, they are not necessities. To start with, at least. Prima facie, to start with, there is no necessity dictating that God has to resurrect it. Why? Why he should be obliged to do that? What oblige him? What's the necessity of that? There's no necessity of reason, apparent one of ontological sense, but maybe that's the way he shows it. So we have to get a report from him. So if we can establish at least one revelation with considerable evidence, solid evidence, then we have proven God. But not only the God of the deist, we have also the God of the theist, and also we will gain a considerable knowledge about his attributes, and together with what we can rationally develop from the concept of this is an existing eternal being and creator. That's one way.
Can we stop there? Stop right there. Okay, you see that last bit that you just said there? That would be a very good address for William Lane Craig.
We'll get all that.
You'd get a
we'll structure the argument. He will hear it. We send him the link to with you.
Five premises.
I am member of his site. I can send him this. That's your response to that.
He's the guy who's basically.
I think he's honestly looking for the truth, but he needs. But again, for him, Islam is something like the enemy. It's not something to deal with.
When he debates with
for him, it is not a matter which should be discussed as a matter of debate. And obviously, grown from an American background in a staunchly, maybe not initially, but staunchly Christian background, the emotion of God sacrificing His Son for us is enormously emotional. But the problem is enormously irrational.
And the angle that they come from, that all Christians are coming from when they look at Islam, is they're saying that Islam, or your God, is very immoral. They come from that point. He's not loving, he's not caring, he's very cold. You have to go to him. Whereas our God is very kind. He comes to us. He loves the sinner, he loves the murderer, the rapist, the paedophile. He reaches out. Your God is very arrogant. You know, you have to knock on his door.
That's an argument from aesthetic, not even from ethic. And it is faulty because the issue is that he's coming out or in. The issue is that did he really die on the cross or his son die on the cross? Is that possible for an existing being? That had to be settled first. That's impossible. That's number one. And did that happen? And after that we can talk about reaching out. They claim he's reaching out and dying on the cross. It's so extreme he's reaching out. But this will lead to contradiction. That's the point. I'm not denying that
this guy, William Lane Craig, the amount of debates that he's done, it's unbelievable. You just type him in. He's debated everybody, and he has also done tours. Muslims, Badawi. He's debated Badawi. He's debated Shabir Ali, but he's debated them on the capacity of the Quran, not proof of God or anything like that. It's just like
his argument's good.
Against
the Muslims, Shabir Ali or Badawi.
Craig destroys. I only saw one of Shabir Ali. He destroyed him. Really? Just finished him. Yeah, he just made him look ridiculous. To be quite honest with you, he just said, he set the agenda for Shabir Ali. He put something to Shabir, and Shabir was trying to prove it. And this is what he put forward.
Let us say the starting point, which I said in the starting point, that starting with anything ethical or aesthetical will end you in the devil's kitchen automatically, right away.
His argument's a bit like this, He goes, I have a problem with your religion because God is letting off the sinners, whereas one of his attributes is he's absolutely just. So for God to forgive your sins, if he's absolutely just, then he's let a sin go off. Then Shabir Ali was saying, no, he was being merciful. A judge can be merciful. But he goes, that's not justice. He's allowed a sin to go. So that isn't justice.
No,
he's merciful, but he's not just. That's why our God died on the cross, because he had to find a way of relieving us of all the sins. He couldn't let injustice go. That's how he died. And for some reason, Shabir Ali just got stuck.
But in Islam, isn't every sin punished? It's still punished, isn't it? If you commit sin.
This is not the way to argue. The way to argue is, first of all, this term absolute justice does not mean anything. There is nothing called justice. What is called is non-injustice. Injustice has to be defined. Injustice is something which contradicts fundamental rationality related to God. For example, that you are a rational being, you have a free will. I can account you only on account of your free will and your capacity and knowledge, not anything else. And I cannot punish your children for your deed. This is a fundamental principle, because if I can punish someone for action he did not do or is not responsible for, the principle of responsibility, meaning the principle of rationality, the cause and effect has been broken. Then we could as well say the universe came into existence without anything, and contingent being can just pop out of existence as good as that. That's the reason why I say a contingent being cannot exist by its own ground. It needs a necessarily existing to kick it out of nothingness into existence. Why? Because the principle of rationality. We cannot divorce cause from effect. You can't divorce contingency from the necessity. So, if that's possible to punish someone, to punish someone for like criminal regimes do, they punish your family if you are opposing them because they are your family, in an attempt to get you to break down. This is a plain injustice, and that what he attributes to Allah to be done on the cross is exactly that. So what he did, he may say, no, this is not punishing Isa for the sin. So the sin has not been punished for. It is a merciful act, erasing the sin. He can do it directly. Why then get someone suffer in between? If it's the sin has been erased, has been not punished, but paid by the suffering of someone who is innocent. It's utter absurdity. It's irrationality. This is irrationality in itself. That's number one. Secondly, is it possible for a necessarily existing being to be split in two or to have son? Or it's impossible. We have discussed that in the book. We can argue, but this is well established. He is using the argument of Saint Augustine because Saint Augustine was for a long time wavered between dualism and Christianity, and his mother persuaded him to go back. He was Christian, then he became dualist, and then he wanted to come to term with the issue of evil and the issue of the sin. And then he constructed this term absolute justice. There is nothing called absolute justice. This is a misconception. It is a non-operation. Now, in the case of the sinner, that the sinner had it, if the sin is against the rights of someone else, it will never be forgiven. You have to pay the debt for the other one. Against him, he has the right not to demand the retribution, because he's infinitely rich and capable. This has nothing to do with injustice. If he admits it's mercy, mercy is higher than injustice. So he's inconsistent there. The angle should be this one. The angle should be this one.
I think with Craig, no atheist has ever taken him on this issue of Trinity. They never
because they don't go to there
because they're scared. They don't want to go into the book because when he takes you into the Bible and
he's a specialist and they are
he even uses equations. I don't even know. I can't even understand it. I've done maths myself. He starts using equations of probability and this one, that one, and so they always never go in that.
No, he's right. So, that the most significant phenomenon which is making Christianity into existence, which is quite well established by many witnesses, is that Jesus reappeared. They call it resurrection. I claim it's not resurrection. Resurrection only if he's really died. I claim it's Judas who died on the cross by divine intervention. That's simpler and less metaphysical and less loaded with ballast. It does not make Jesus the Son of God. It does not get in the impossibility of the necessary existing being split in two or having a semen going or any kind of it. Or if it is the Trinity that's 1 in 3 and 3 in 1, then if it is really 3 separate entities, then they are separate and it's not necessarily existing. If they are only one entity, then it's God himself who died on the cross. But God cannot die. So we got in infinite many contradictions. There's no way to overcome that. And a better solution is this. And he appeared again, yes, that's historically well established. He's right. The probability is that this is a lie and Christianity kicked out of nothing is as absurd as anything else. But he reappeared after the traitor has been crucified. And Paul got stuck because Paul was influenced. We have no evidence for that historically, but historic record suggests that he was influenced by Mithraism. And he wanted his Jewish God, because he's a Jew, and he studied at the Gamaliel, to be as kind or as having this sentimentality like the Mithraism God. And the only combination was Jesus dying on the cross for our sins. Or the original theory was to redeem us from the devil. Not Paul's, but a more common theory either. But then they recognized this is impossible and they gave that up. So to redeem us from the sin or something like that. But this is impossible. So it can't be an explanation.
But Shabir Ali, for him to enter into that discussion with William Lane Craig, isn't that irrational? He's arguing against. I mean, God is just. God is merciful. God cries. God something that we can't perceive, something which is not rational. It's essentially irrational questions that he's asking him. So God is just. That means
that's not God there. Only this can be addressed.
Meaning is that it's a wrong discussion to have, because God's mercy, God's justness.
But also all these issues they say
His death and define it in Scripture as God's.
Well, I have a feeling Shabir thought that one of Allah's attributes is absolute justice.
Yes, but not in the same way we understand what justice is.
No, he has to analyze the term of injustice first. What is really justice?
Yeah, but the thing is, most merciful.
And the injustice is called justice. But what is injustice undefined? The only definition which stands scrutiny, it has absolute term and applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the hadith when it says, "O my servant, I promised myself to be unjust," because it's possible to be unjust. Evidence, look at the governments all over the world, how much injustice they do. So it's possible, it's a possibility. So it's possible for humans, it's possible for the infinite being to do even worse if he wanted. But he prohibited himself from doing it. So don't oppress each other. Non-oppression. فَلَا تَظَالَمُوا. Zulm is that what he prohibited himself. Because the term justice is empty. What is zulm? Zulm will be, for example, punishing the innocent, the one who did not do the crime. Why is this zulm and it's rationally recognizable as zulm or as negative? Because it divorces cause and effect, because punishment means. But it does not mean the innocent having to suffer if it is not a punishment. Like, for example, in an earthquake, many are killed. Innocent and innocent just haphazard, like the nature. This is the suffering because the law of the universe. That's not punishment for them. It's not punishment for anything. It may be punishment for some of the adults for their sins, but the other one have to, because the earthquake will not distinguish. Look, you are a small boy, go outside and we're going to swallow. It's not going to work this way. So that's not the way. So the Islam of the universe has to work this way, and those are suffering, but they are not suffering as a punishment. Actually, they will get reward of martyrdom for that, as a compensation from Allah out of mercy. Although He's not obliged to reward. That's the system of the universe. You are in the universe. You enjoy existence for a certain time. That's all that you get. But He gives more. So injustice really essentially punishing the innocent. This is an essential injustice where everyone agrees. There was an atheist one discussing this and say, well, how unjust is to crucify his own son for the sake of humanity. And he was discussing that. I think this is an absolute term.
I think it's worth doing a homework on this one.
And in that case, if you start from this point, then the issue of crucifixion becomes nonsensical. And all the covering it up with the emotionality of love and coming out of his way does not save the day from the irrationality.
Here in the room, if you can just kind of, in your spare time, have a look
analyze that and see how we proceed further.
Out there, but the arguments are.
Beware that there's such thing, like, for example, like absolute power which does the impossible. This will be contradictory. Like a famous argument of the atheist: can God create a stone which is so heavy that He cannot lift it, or infinitely heavy? There's nothing. Such a stone is not a contingent being. It's not a contingency, it's an impossibility. And the power does not extend to the impossible. Otherwise, He could annihilate Himself. So He's necessary and non-necessary at the same time. This is absurd. The reason is gone, and then we again welcome to the mental institution, where everyone is inside on his own ground. That's the same with absolute knowledge. Is there some things which is unknowable in the future? God will know all the possible contingencies, but which one we realize when we realize at that moment. This is a very critical, dangerous area of qadr. We leave that at the side. Leave that. But issue of justice. What is the meaning of absolute justice? What's the meaning of absolute justice? Give everyone what's his right. Now, God is having the right to punish you for disobeying Him. If it's between you and Him, absolutely. He has the right, but it's not the obligation. That's giving everyone his right. Between humans, you can forgive someone, and this will not undermine justice. Someone took from you money, he ought to pay you back. Say, no, I forgive you. Is that unjust? No.
You might deal with
it. Craig was saying,
the necessity of reason.
Crimes go, yet He's absolute just. No. That's how He fell into the trap.
This is using a term which is self-contradictory.
He's absolutely just, and He's letting crimes go.
No,
he goes, no, He forgave them. A judge can forgive. Yeah, he goes, yeah, that's forgiveness, but still He's let crimes go. Whereas our God could not let crimes go, so the way you suck up all the injustice is to crucify. Yeah.
And that committing injustice against Himself or His own Son.
You might deal with it in a different lecture another time, but can you just define qadr? You were saying it's a fine point. Can you just define what you mean by it? So I understand the term correctly. I just want to
because the divine previous knowledge, omniscience or omniprescience. Omniscience is no doubt, but omniprescience, knowing things in advance. Does it extend to things which are depending upon free will in the future? Yes, the possibilities which are open are known to him, because he knows the system, including the nature of the free agents, and even about his own decision down in the future. He knows that I can have so many, maybe infinite many choices, but which one I will choose later, maybe this is not decided at that moment, so it's not accessible to knowledge, but this is an issue which has to be discussed more philosophically and more in a more complex way. But I mean, even knowledge may have a limit in that sense, may. Power definitely has a limit, that it cannot get to the impossible, nor it can break the necessary. It's only the contingent. Otherwise, we have complete irrationality right away. Everything is gone, finished. You see my point? So, it's something like absolute justice or absolute love is nonsense. It does not lead anywhere. It leads immediately contradiction and undermine, and the atheists will be laughing to the bank, making you look stupid and funny immediately.
Sorry, Doc, sorry to interrupt, but someone keeps saying that I asked a question previously, but I forgot.
Yeah, he asked the question. He said that most atheists now believe that we have a beginning, maybe the Big Bang Theory. How can you prove God started or initiated this beginning?
No, it's all what we say. There are various stages in the argument. The Big Bang itself is a good help, give you a good argument that we have beginning on time, but we did not know that. Al Ghazali argued that the time must have a beginning. It cannot go infinite.
But we are not even sure if the Big Bang happened. It's still a theory.
It's irrelevant. We are sure that there's an expansion. The universe started from. The only issue is that when it was in the size of the Planck size.
Doc, can you explain that now? Everybody agrees that the universe
started.
Even all the scientists now.
It's very
the 1970s.
All observation cannot be synchronized at all, except that the universe started very small and expanded. Now the question: that very small, what is it? The original Big Bang theory is that it started from a singularity.
Maybe it's something elastic that gets smaller and bigger.
No, it's not possible.
Infinitely.
That's we'll come to that. But it was the current phase. It started from either zero or from very small size. The final point of the start is irrelevant. It started and expanded, and even the expansion at the beginning was inflationary. This is necessary to explain certain features of the universe. And all models which work like that will give you then the distribution of galaxies. It has been done mathematically with computer models, which will give you the structure of the universe when you plot the galaxies as have been observed, and that has been calculated. You are shocked how similar it is. So that has been well established beyond doubt. The reason for believing that the universe is expanding now is that we have the so-called redshift. The farther the galaxy is, or the more light is shifted to the red, which means it is receding away from us. There were attempts to explain the redshift by other means, but all of them collapsed. There is no other explanation except this. You perceive that when a police car comes to you, rushing to you, then the sound is very, and it changes. This is shift to the red, to the high frequency or to the low frequency. The same with the light. The same happens with the light. So it must be receding. All other explanation has been ruled out. It's the only one. So we have an expanding universe. Details of expansion in major structure like an inflation phase is necessary. Otherwise, this type of the universe and homogeneity is not guaranteed. So that's well established. Was it a singularity? Was it non-singularity? Just the smallest we can check is really a Planck size, which is 1 trillion, or even a nuclear size. That's not very relevant for this argument. The issue of the universe expanding and going infinitely like that, that's very intriguing, because this is a possible solution of Einstein's equation. But that's only a solution of an empty universe which has no matter and energy. Only an empty universe could be pulsating for all eternities. The moment you have matter, in every development you have accumulation of dark matter, something called dark matter, and accumulation of entropy which cannot be accounted for. So after few expansion, it will expand forever or collapse forever. It can't go further, except a purely empty, pure mathematical solution. But the moment you have put even one atom there, it will collapse. It won't go for all eternities. So that can be proven mathematically. A pulsating universe will not sustain itself unless it is absolutely empty.
So
it's just space-time empty.
Sorry, how do you tackle the problem where they say Okay, we know it had a beginning or it had a start,
Yeah.
but to say that was God, we
Yeah.
don't have no knowledge of
If
that.
it,
So
we have to.
until you give us a good
If it has a beginning, no. If it has a beginning, the problem they are not rationalizing properly, not articulating the issue correctly. As I said, it has a beginning, so it is contingent. Where is the necessarily existing which kicked it out of into existence, or welcome to the mental institution? There, so you make your choice.
So
You
the one
still
that
have a
actually
choice.
places the free agent, we call it Allah.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it.
Beginning, there's an end, therefore
Someone else
finite,
kicked it.
and Allah is
And that someone must be essentially different than the universe. It cannot be subject to the law of the universe. He has its own law possibly, but it must be acting on freedom, not by
because
necessity.
I think that people are afraid of saying it's God because they say you have to take that leap of faith. So,
It's not leap of faith.
but logically, if what you're saying is that it has to have a beginning, therefore it's finite. Therefore, if it's finite, the only logical and outcome has to be
And it's just an existing being kicking existence, and that has been done by an act of free will. That's enforced also that the initial parameters have to be chosen, and it's only a free agent can that. That's the meaning of a free choice. It is not a mechanical process, because then if it says it's just a mechanism or a horrible machine which is doing that, maybe a big machine spitting that one, that machine is having its own law. It's mechanical in some sense or another, and it has also parameter or no parameter. Then describe me, give me its description. Just what we're saying, no, it's not possible, it can't be. And then the question is that why this universe and not another, why this choice? It must be chosen. It cannot be by mechanical. Otherwise the universe itself should have been completely self and mechanical. Why then this machine split this one? It does not make any sense.
Yeah.
It's no explanation. It must be a free agent. An agent. It's not anthropomorphism or imagining God to be like man. No, it's the opposite. Man has been created the image of God in the sense it has free will and so on. It is a miniature being which has these features in a limited way, but in a way which resemble the divine matter according to the image of the divine, or the image of the merciful Lord.
I think 2 or 3 circles down the line, I think it might be interesting to point out that this whole discussion of fitrah, that man has this innate fitrah in him that he has to search for the message.
This is you can have 2 proofs for that. One for a Muslim, the metaphysical statement by the Prophet ﷺ that he said every human is born on the fitrah of Islam, even submissively to Allah, the One. And then his parents turn him into Judaism, even he regarded Judaism and not the fitrah of Islam, because the fitrah of Islam will explain to you that the infinite being will never die on a cross. It's not possible. Nor he can have a son. And even if he has a son, the son is infinite. If it's a real son, if it's just an adoptive son, then what is the fuss? He's another human being he adopted. He's just an elected human being lifted to the level of an adoptive son. But he's still human. So why this poor human should suffer for others? So God did not suffer for us.
And I could be the other adopted son as well.
Yeah. So yeah. So this is even one child was one missionary was discussing with a child, I think maybe in the Gulf, and the child was behind or maybe they're living in America. They seem to be Gulf people, and he told me Jesus loves you and so on, etc. Why don't you listen to say who is Jesus? The boy about 10 years says Son of God. So I don't listen to him. I am God. If Son of God can come down, I am God. A small boy answering him like that. If that's possible, that is possible. How do you know that I am not God? And he was not it. A small child answering God, because the argument that God's love you is an emotional argument. That's not a rational argument. It appeals to emotions. That's the problem with emotion. They can't take you carry away.
Yeah, cut it here
Fantastic.
In these issues, you have your mind should work. Emotion should be there. But the mind should be in the driving seat. Your emotion is like a horse, but you have to restrain it and be on the back. Otherwise, it will run away with you and get you.